All right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. I'm Raf Diallo and joined by former Ireland defender Stephen Kelly and ex-League of Ireland and FAI Cup winner Karl Sheppard. So we're going to be talking about the League of Ireland later on in terms of the weekend's results in the Premier Division, Women's National League and First Division. But before that, it's back to international action. Stephen, I suppose we're 4 months now since that 3-0 win in Luxembourg where everyone kind of left on a high, and maybe the hope is like momentum isn't lost. So in terms of these March games against Belgium on Saturday and then Lithuania on Tuesday of next week, this is all about trying to recapture the momentum that was there at the end of the World Cup qualifying campaign.
Yeah, and just keeping the confidence in the group of players. You know, you want to build on what was past, and Belgium's kind of a free hit to some extent. I know, obviously, with being how highly ranked they are in the world, you know, the expectations can't be as high to try and get a result, even though they have a weaker squad than normal. But it's an opportunity for these. There's a lot of young players trying to perform, and Stephen is really cementing it. I suppose an aspect of the game that he has his mentality of being able to turn those draws into wins and trying to push that through. So I think for me, it's important that we go out with the same fashion they had before, the energy, passion, going to perform and just get results from one of these games just to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, and Karl, looking at the squad that was named, in terms of the players that are in, most of them have been part of the squad, at least even some prior to Stephen Kenny's time. Obviously, the likes of Seamus Coleman, James McLean, needless to say, but also the likes of Scott Hogan coming back. But largely, it's a squad built for continuity, it seems, other than, say, Conor Ronan and Mark Sykes coming in, rather than one for wholesale experimentation.
Yeah, look, I suppose obviously Conor Ronan coming in from St Mirren, he's been doing quite well, and you have, I suppose it really is about just building on what he's done in the past. So you can see there's a style of play that Stephen Kenny's brought in. I think everyone's starting to, I suppose, reap the rewards from how they have been playing up the last few results. They've, and I suppose it's about bringing in the newer generation. I suppose he was speaking on, the Late Late Show, talking about that, about how he's having to, I suppose, bring in the next generation of Irish players, and you can see he speaks so passionately about it. And I think it'll be maybe over the next year or two we start to, I suppose, plenty of them players he worked with in the under-21 start to come through.
Yeah, and one player, and I think this was the kind of grand narrative towards the end of last week after the squad was named, it was regards to Michael Obafemi and why he didn't get a call up. So obviously he's started scoring goals for Swansea, 6 in his last 10, 7 for the season. But let's listen to Stephen Kenny first, and then we'll talk about what that means for his international career.
Michael was never in the picture to be in this under-21 squad, so I'm not sure how that discussion occurred, but I've obviously went to Bristol City and Swansea a few weeks ago. Cyrus Christie scored that day, Michael scored, and I spoke to Michael after the game, good chat with him after the game, and I had a good conversation with him this week as well. And he would have been considered for selection if he'd have been available. He wasn't available for selection. More complex probably. The truth of it is that Michael's never played 3 games in a row before this year for his club, as far as I know. This we've checked, but he's not played 3 games consecutively in his career. So, and the reason for that really is because of his persistent hamstring troubles he's had in his career. He's been, dogged with hamstring issues. Such an explosive player, and also the competition at Southampton as well, which was very heavy. He's found a manager who believes in Russell Martin. Russell Martin's believed in Michael and played him and persisted with him throughout the season. Michael's managed to stay fit and looks a real threat in recent weeks, and got 2 very good goals against Coventry and backed that up the other night. It's been a heavy load for him. I think there's a degree of anxiety around Michael himself about being injured, and he's never had to what he's had before, a run of games, and he feels his load is so heavy. He's concerned about re-injuring, coming into the national team, trying to train every day and play again, and feels he needs to spend time with the physios to make sure he can continue in the vein of form. But he reiterated his commitment to Ireland, wants to play for Ireland, certain that he wants to play for Ireland, but just the degree of anxiety he feels around coming in this week with his injury load, that's why he's not involved, he's not considered.
So that is Ireland manager Stephen Kenny discussing the case of Michael Obafemi, who will not be linking up with the squad this time. Stephen, I suppose in terms of what this means for Obafemi's international hopes, now he is still young, he's only 21 years old and plenty of time ahead of him, but he hasn't really been in the picture since he won his first cap under Martin O'Neill all those years ago. What does it mean for him in terms of trying to win back his place? Because on one hand, you can look at it that none of the strikers in the squad, bar Callum Robinson, have really established themselves as a kind of first choice pick. But on the other hand, it's probably sometimes better to just be in the picture.
I think the fact that he's having a conversation with Stephen Kenny, and it seems positive for him to be in the squad in the future, bodes well for us that he will be back involved at some point. But it comes to a point in your career if you want to be and he is young and he has suffered injury, so I can totally take that on board. I could completely understand if he has anxiety towards overloading and stuff. But there comes a point in your career where you have to be able to play week in, week out, and that involves playing for your country. And you often get a week or two off in the summer, and that's it. You don't have much of a break, but your career is short. And, playing for your country is such a privilege and such an honour that you got to make the most of it. Maybe this might be the right time. And the fact that it is one of the first seasons where he's played consecutive games week in, week out. But I think the fact that having a conversation, the fact that he's still talking to him in the future going forward, form will be key. If he's playing and he's scoring goals, he'll absolutely have a chance of playing for us. It's just going to be down to his decision where he wants to or not. And, that's where, for me, there's a bit of a grey area. And I think if you have to commit to it. Playing for Ireland is one of the highlights, one of the best things I've ever done in my life, and it's such a privilege. So take those opportunities and don't let them go. And I think that would be my advice to him.
Yeah, as you said, I think the anxiety about his injury record, especially he's had problems with his hamstrings, as Stephen Kenny outlined there. It's very understandable if he wants to work with his club physios. But at the same time, I suppose if you were in his shoes, and obviously it's very difficult to say, like, we all have our different circumstances, but would you have maybe thought about maybe coming in and doing the kind of light training, not actually being involved in the games, but just being in and around the camp and, like, I suppose being integrated in after such a long time away from international consideration?
No, absolutely. I would have, to be honest, for me, like, I often would go to Ireland and know I'd have a knock and still go just because it's Ireland. Like, and I think most people feel that way about playing for their country, and that would have always kind of, I would have put Ireland ahead of club first to some extent, just because, like, I just look at Seamus Coleman. Let's go back to him now, and he's not having the best of time ever. But I know he'll love coming into the Ireland camp because that'll be a sense of relief and a change of scenery for him that will benefit him and his mentality and everything. And for Obafemi, I think he needs to get to that. He needs to get to that point where Ireland becomes a passion, becomes enjoyable. And if you're not in the squad, you're not going to get that sense of how enjoyable it is and how much it means to represent this country. So, not being involved, I'm sure he could have come in, had a conversation, say, listen, play me 45 and won these games. That I'm sure that conversation could have been had. So it's disappointing, but they are talking, they're communicating. It's nothing's dead and buried. There is scope for him to come in the future, but I think it's going to be down to his desire to actually want to play for us.
Yeah, now Aaron Connolly has been also left out, but similar reasons for him, and it's down to fitness. He hasn't really been training, although he has been playing games for Middlesbrough on loan. But Jamie McGrath is probably the other notable absentee, Karl, and since his move to Wigan, he hasn't really got going, so it's probably understandable from that point of view. And also, maybe on a positive side, it just points to the depth we can have, that players like McGrath, who have been integrated in, can be left out from time to time.
Yeah, like when Jamie came in, he done very, very well. I suppose there's a testament to him that how well he done when I think he started the next game, that no one batted an eyelid at it, that he was selected because he done so well against Portugal that I suppose now it's I suppose it does show that we've got strength in midfield. The Michael Obafemi one for me is, I wonder if perhaps his ego was a bit hurt from being left out before. I know he certainly mentioned it on Twitter at the time. I think he put up a few emojis about how odd it was for him to be left out. So I wonder if it's perhaps that he possibly wants to represent Ireland, but maybe just isn't, I suppose, getting on too well with Stephen at the moment. But again, I suppose it might just have to be that he has to swallow his pride and come in, because if it was me and I'm getting a call up, and even if I know I'm not 100%, you'd be going in, you'd be seeing the physios there, you'd be showing that I'm going to be a part of this, to rule yourself out so you can stay at home with your own physios. Probably won't sit too well with not just Stephen Kenny and their physios, but probably with a few of the more senior players in the squad. They might be thinking, okay, well, we maybe need to give him a call and just get him on board.
Yeah. Mark Sykes is, apart from Conor Ronan, who I think it's been well documented, he was expected to come in because of his great form at St Mirren and scored a great goal in the Scottish Cup just a couple of weeks ago. But Mark Sykes at Oxford, who would have come through at Glenavon, would have switched eligibility from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland a couple of years ago. He's doing well in League One. Stephen, have you seen much of him in terms of what he can bring?
I've read a bit. I've read a little bit. And I've seen a couple of clips of him playing, but he seems quite dynamic, and he plays off that. He's like a number 10 role, so he plays a higher advanced midfield. So he gets forward, assists, goals. I just think it was for him a couple of years ago to make that decision, knowing he wasn't really close to the setup. It's quite a brave decision to make in your playing career, and for it to be paying off now, it's great for him. And that role that I think for Ireland could be quite key, because he does link the midfield and the forwards quite well, and he's got an assist in him, which, you know, for us, goal scoring of late has been better, but that's something that we can always improve on with Ireland. So the better players we have feeding the strikers, getting balls into them will help us. So someone that's a bit more dynamic in those front areas to join in, I think, would definitely benefit us. Yeah,
definitely. I saw a few of his clips on YouTube, although obviously a YouTube footballer, as we all know, like we're seeing all the good bits. Everybody looks like the best player in the world, but he does have an eye for goal for sure, and kind of a nose for following in behind the striker. So that all bodes well. And I know Sammy Clingan, who would have played for Northern Ireland back in the day and was his teammate at Glenavon during the later point of his career, seems to rate him highly, thinks he's going to have a huge impact. But Stephen, in terms of the system, so we've been kind of working off a back three now, kind of 5-3-2, or also the kind of 4-3 or 3-4-3. Do you think in these friendlies, is there scope for either maintaining and just working and honing that system, or should they be looking at experimenting a little bit, maybe playing a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, whatever it is, and just having an alternative?
I could possibly see him playing a 4-3-3 in one of the games, just to have as a backup. It's always good to be able to adapt to play against different sides, to maybe shore things up a little bit more. But I think what suits us best is the 5. I think when you have Matt Doherty and Seamus and those players, you have to play to the strengths of the best players you have. And Matt at the moment is flying at Spurs. He really is doing so well. And the mentality shown to get back into that team is fantastic. So I watched the game yesterday, and again, he was just on the front foot. He was energetic. He was positive, just looking like that Wolves player that we loved. So getting him in that right wing back position, which suits him best and will give us the best benefits. And then you can look at, obviously, Edna Stevens not in the squad, but James McLean does that left wing back role well. And it just gives us a bit of an attacking front point as well, and having the 2 sit midfielders with one in front to join in, bit of solidity. So I think that shape really suits us at the moment, and I can't see him tinkering. But if there's an opportunity to try and change things up, it'll be within these friendlies, just to see how we can adapt to different scenarios, different teams that will put more pressure on us, and we can, if we need to change to a back 4 and overload the midfield just to get hold of a game, it'd be interesting to see if you can do that.
Yeah, obviously, I know you'd follow Spurs quite closely. So you mentioned Matt Doherty there, and you know, I was wondering what is it that's actually kind of spurred him on, pardon the pun, over the last few weeks, because he seems to have gone from kind of being a fringe player, and then Conte seems to have found something in him. And as we know, it's not about pace with Matt Doherty; it's kind of intelligence and interlinking. So what has brought the best out of him in that kind of wing back role under Conte that Ireland can maybe benefit from?
I think when you look at the way Spurs are playing, it's very similar to the way Wolves played. And Matt was at his best when he was in that Wolves team that basically attacked and broke with pace, with their fullback or their wing backs really getting high up the pitch and joining in. And Conte loves that style of football. That's his system. So I think what Matt had to do was, at the start of the season, he looked off the pace a little bit, didn't look as fit as he was before. And again, he's not rapidly quick, but he's got the energy to go up and down the pitch. And he just didn't seem like he was capable of doing that. Also, you bring in Sergio Romero, that right side of centre back, and always having a player like that can cover space and leads the role well, allows you to be higher up the pitch and allows Matt to do his job better. So I think buying into that. And I think another thing is he's just really bought into Antonio Conte. I think if you have a manager like that coming in and you show him a full commitment, the desire to play his way and just, you know, take on board everything he's teaching you, then that manager's going to like you and going to trust you. And that's what Matt's done. You can tell Conte spoke about him, talk about his improvement since he's been there. It's been really rapid, and he's adjusted and adapted to the style and to the energy he expects from him. So I think for Matt, it's been a great rejuvenation, and something that's completely delighted for Irish fans, because to have him in the setup confident is going to make a huge difference for us.
Yeah, and he's certainly going to start at least one of the games, possibly both. I suppose on the selection overall, and I know in friendlies sometimes there is the temptation to make wholesale changes maybe in the second game or against what is perceived to be the weaker opponent, which would be Lithuania. But given that they're building towards a Nations League campaign and then beyond that to European qualifiers next year, is it more a case of trying to give as much game time to like a 15 or 16 rather than making too many changes?
I think he has to stick with what he's gone with before, just to try and keep the shape of the style and try and keep that momentum going. And you would think the Lithuania game is a game where you're going to make changes, bring players on. And I think in those forward areas is something that you would feel to get as many of those guys on in and around the action, try and get goals in and get their confidence up playing for Ireland. Just get them feeling part of it, which was where we need to be at our best. And if we want to see a chance of qualification as goals, it's got to be something we have to be pushing for. So I could see there being changes in the Lithuania game much more than the Belgium one. But like I said, it's just keeping that momentum going, keeping the good atmosphere and vibes around the place. Everybody seems really happy and content. And the looks like Gavin Mizuno and Caoimhín Kelleher are really standing out for their clubs, and when they've come in Irish jerseys, have been brilliant. So you think that just building on everything that's going forward and keep that, I don't want to say momentum again, but it's just happy. There's a really good atmosphere around the place, and the atmosphere at the Aviva the last game was sensational. So you want to just bring that forward into the next games.
Yeah, and Karl, just on the forward area, because I think the midfield seems to be fairly settled in that, that Josh Cullen is going to be there alongside Jeff Hendrick and maybe Jason Knight if they play a 3. But up front, Callum Robinson seems to be nailed down, whether it's in a 2 or a 3 up front. But who would you be looking at in these upcoming games to sort of either partner him, or if you're going for a wholesale change as a front 2 or 3? Is it kind of Will Keane as a partner for him? I know he actually thrived as a number 10 this season for Wigan, rather than just as a pure centre forward. But in terms of options, are you thinking about Troy Parrott either? How would you look at it, and how do you think Stephen Kenny will try and decipher that?
Yeah, I think at the moment he'll probably put Chidozie in as well, because Chidozie's done so well for him. He's in all the games so far that he's played in, he's been electric. He's certainly not let him down. And I think with Stephen, he tends to be the type of manager that if you play well for him, he's going to play you over and over. It doesn't matter if there's a bigger name there beside him. He's probably going to play you just because he knows he can trust you. And Callum Robinson, exactly. When he's come in, he's done brilliant for him so far. So I think Callum Robinson has it nailed down. I suppose it's just who else he's going to put up there, if he's going to put the 2 or if he's going to play 2 in off the wings beside him. I think, I suppose we know with Will Keane, he's been doing well for Wigan this year, and obviously he's recalled Scott Hogan, so he might have an intention of possibly putting 2 up for this camp.
Yeah, you mentioned Ogbeni there, because at Rotherham, obviously he's playing sort of as a wing back for the most part, and then obviously he's probably more natural as a kind of right-sided player. And then we found him kind of playing in this forward role now with Ireland, where he's able to run the channels and everything. Like, it just shows his sort of versatility, and it's kind of a boon for us.
Yeah, it is. And Chidozie was at Cork City when I was there, and he was coming through. And again, you could see that he was one of them players that he had so much physical attributes that he could almost play anywhere, because if he was playing right back, he'd be running up past me. It wouldn't have been hard. I was getting on at that stage, but he'd be running up past me, and he just has that explosive pace and power that he can play pretty much any position. But I think what works him best is when he's running into the channels and I suppose he's trying to stretch defences, which can then give our midfield a bit more space to play. So
Belgium on Saturday 26th, probably going to be the strongest team, is going to be played. And then Lithuania on Tuesday the 29th. But Stephen Kelly, I know you probably have a busy day coming up, so we're going to let you go. Cheers. And we're going to be chatting League of Ireland. So thanks a million for joining.
Thanks, cheers.
Thanks to Stephen Kelly for coming on. But now we are joined by Peter Branigan of RTÉ Sport Online, who will fill in at right back now that Stephen Kelly has departed, and it's time to talk League of Ireland. So Premier Division results, On Friday night, it was Shamrock Rovers 2, Sligo Rovers 2 at Tallaght Stadium. Shelbourne lost 3-0 to Finn Harps at Talca Park. Drogheda United 1, Dundalk 0. That was the TV game on RT2 and the RT Player. Derry City 2, St. Pat's 1. A big win there for Derry, who remain top. And again, it was the two teams that have been tipped to push Shamrock Rovers involved there. So that was an interesting result. And then UCD 1, Bows 1, which of course would have caught Peter Branigan's eye, I'm sure. But before we get to that, Karl, I suppose that was a Friday coming off the back of a previous Friday, Monday turnaround. And I know you've kind of misgivings about the quality levels that result in those kind of quick turnarounds.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the season, when you have to get extra games forced in, it makes sense to do it. And I suppose it's a necessary evil that you have to put up with. But for so early in the season, when players are only getting into their stride, they won't even be fully match fit yet. They'll be at the point now where when around 80 minutes, they're still probably all starting to get a little bit of cramp in the hamstring and stuff. Not only is it, I suppose, borderline dangerous to play them this early, them Friday, Monday, Fridays, but you could see a real lack of quality in these games on Friday. It happens all the time when they put them in this early in the year. Towards the end of the season, you're match fit and you're well used. You could probably play a Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and it wouldn't be too much of an effort. But this early in the season, the quality just really lacks in these games when they squeeze them in so early. It's I just feel that for supporters as well going in, and we're trying to promote the league, and even look at the Drogheda Dundalk game that was on TV, it wasn't a great watch, and you could tell that not only were players a bit leggy, but the pitch wasn't great, and just wasn't a great watch, to be honest.
And how difficult did you find those kind of turnarounds in your playing days? And at any age, I guess, whether you were younger or as you got older, because again, as you said, those kind of games come thick and fast, and especially at this point of the season, it's one, because obviously you'll have gone through pre-season, but at the same time, by the time you're kind of fully at a peak, that's probably later in the campaign. Yeah,
it is. You're like the first few weeks of the season, you're still only, I've seen players that they take 5, 6, 7 games to kind of get up to 100% match fitness. And I would have been one of them myself, that maybe 5, 6 games in, I'd have kind of just been ticking over maybe 80-85%. But it would have been them extra couple of games and them couple 90 minutes into the belt that really would have got me up to, I suppose, proper match sharpness. And what you find is the Friday, Monday game, it doesn't be too bad. You get through it, you'll be tired on the Monday's game. But the Friday game, not only is it motivation that you're possibly struggling with, but it's also you're going into the game physically sore, and you could see it. I suppose if it was there for everyone to see it, especially in the Drogheda Dundalk game, that the explosiveness just isn't there. It's them rapid players are down that little bit in speed. The players who have that little bit of extra skill and all, it's still there, but it's just I suppose that little maybe 2-3% that you're missing from that. I suppose really when everyone's 2-3% down, it all starts to add up a lot.
Yeah, I suppose Peter as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the big point that I take from what Karl was saying there is the pitches. Like, I've seen a lot of UCD games this season. I was up at Head in the Game Park for Drogheda UCD. The pitch up there was great, but the pitch, the ball, because of the whole rugby AIL thing going on as well, is never particularly great at this time of the season. And I don't know, maybe that suits UCD. I don't really think it does. I think Andy Meyer always tries to get his team playing like a decent game. It's a passing game. But I definitely agree with Karl there. Pitches they're not in great nick at this time of the year, and it just detracts. It's particularly, we've got such a good bump of support at the start of this season. You want as many of those people to stay towards the middle of the season when maybe a team isn't necessarily going for a league title or whatever it might be, that kind of way.
Yeah, so we'll start with Drogheda United's 1-0 win over Dundalk in the Louth derby. So Kevin Doherty was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue afterwards on RT2 and the RT Player. So here is the Drogheda United manager's reaction.
Well, we've won 2 games out of 6 now, so not the worst. We played the top 3 teams, I think, as well, as in that where the Bar Pats will play them next, but the 3 unbeaten teams, I should say. We've now give us confidence, momentum. Like, I think we were probably really, really unlucky in a lot of the games. And then, I spoke to you already about the injuries and stuff, but give us a boost. 2 weeks now, said it to them before the match. We don't want to be looking at that table even for the next 2 weeks, sitting down even at the bottom of it, because if results had gone against us, which I look at your monitor, I think they did. So we had to get a good vibe around the place. Go and win the game. big loud Derry, give the supporters something to be proud of, and I think they are tonight.
Yeah, a word about the atmosphere, because if you can recreate that every week, you're going to go flying up the table.
Yeah, great, absolutely brilliant. Look, and I knew it would be, of course, the loud Derby, but they've been like that all season. Sligo, UCD, even Shelbourne, the first game, the supporters are absolutely magnificent. I sound like an old cliche about 12 men and all that, but there was, I'd say, 112 men tonight, because that was tough. Even though we, as you say, we could have scored 3 or 4 goals, we're still only 1-0, and Dundalk were always going to put pressure on to change the shape, had a go at us. But the supporters really got our lads through it, and it's very much appreciated by me and all the staff and players.
All right, so that's Drogheda United manager Kevin Doherty, their second win of the season in their 6 games so far. Dean Williams with the winner, and he had another great chance in the first half, and then Adam Foley smacked one off the crossbar as well. So a huge win for them, Karl. I suppose in terms of Drogheda, they're expected to be in that battle near the bottom, at least trying to, avoid the drop, or maybe, end up maybe in the relegation playoff, and that's in that sort of zone of the table. But in regards to bottling what they were able to bring against Dundalk, because it's a derby, you're able to get yourself up for it, but you're not going to be playing derbies every week. So what can they do to, I suppose, maintain the momentum they built from that?
Yeah, I suppose it's just about consistency for Drogheda. They have vastly experienced players. When you look at the game, Foley, Deegan, Georgie Point, and I thought was excellent on the night. For me, he was man of the match. He was very, very good at right back, and Dane Massey as well in there. When you have that much experience in a squad, it's just about getting the young lads around you to, I suppose, buy into every week, to doing things right in training, and then to bring it into the game. And if they battle and fight like that, then they'll be fine. I suppose on the other hand, for Dundalk, that could possibly be their Achilles heel this year for teams that sort of look to go and outfight them, because you can see Dundalk, they're very nice on the eye. They try and play nice football, but I think Stevie will be looking at it going, okay, we're still maybe 5 or 6 players short for where we need to be.
Yeah, and they were also missing Stephen Bradley from the start. Now, he came on in the second half, and they looked a bit more transformed in attack. He's obviously had a good start to the season, but a lot of their chances in terms of creativity, it seems to lean on his shoulders. Yeah,
it does. And look, when they play with Pat Hoban up front, Pat's he's an amazing goal scorer. He's fantastic in the air and holds it up brilliantly. What Pat doesn't have is pace. So when Pat's done well in a team, it's always been with people who are willing to run in behind, and you need to have pace alongside Pat to not only stretch it, but then if the teams aren't stretched, you can't get it into Pat's feet because it's so tight and compact in midfield. So it's something that Stevie will be definitely looking at, saying, okay, well, I know Pat's a goal scorer. We need to get the service into him. As you mentioned, Bradley, when he came on, he was very good. His delivery was great. His feet are fantastic. He nearly scored one that would have been definitely a goal of the season contender. It just went wide, but it's something that Stevie will be, I suppose, slightly worried about as well. Just for me, when I looked at the team on Friday night, their midfielders a lot of times were going back and being safe, and that was something that Stephen Kenny, even Stevie O'Donnell, when he played, was far from that. He was always about turning on the front foot, going forward. And I definitely think Steve will be trying to implement that. If it's not with these players now, it'll be with new signings.
Yeah, and the Dean Williams goal that I mentioned was from the spot. So Greg Sloggett adjudged to have committed the foul. Was it a penalty for you? Because I think there seemed to be a bit of division in terms of people who were reacting to it. Some thought maybe it was a bit soft, and others thought actually, yeah, there's enough contact to warrant that decision.
No, I think it's a penalty. When you look at Sloggett's reaction, I think it tells it all. Like, a player knows when he's committed a foul, or if he hasn't, straight away Sloggett gets up, gives it the no, nothing happened, and then as soon as it's given, there's no complaints. It's just, I suppose he's disappointed with his first touch. He sort of panics, and as he does that, he turns around, and I think he just kind of tries on the back of his ankle. For me, it was a definite penalty, and I think Sloggett's reaction sort of tells that for you.
Yeah. One other thing on that match, and I think it's to do with the venue and the stadium as well. I know, Karl, you have some misgivings, and I know, Peter, you mentioned that you were up there. I think it was the day that there was the free entry, which was done as a thank you to people, especially after the 2 years of the COVID pandemic. But Karl, your view on the ground. So heading the game park, in terms of how it looked on TV, particularly, you had some misgivings.
Yeah, look, I think there's great momentum in the league at the moment with fans going to games, but to get, I suppose, what is them floating fans into the ground. We need to make it look good on TV. If it doesn't look good on TV, you're not going to go. Drogheda have done some amazing things this year. They really have. I know they have had a great stance on betting in the league, and I suppose hats off to them. They've done some great things, even renaming the stadium. So for me, it's just when the goalposts, I suppose the paint is coming off the posts, it doesn't look great. When aesthetically it looks so poor. I think I know everyone wants to go around the leagues with TV and be fair and how each game is televised, but for me, there should be if it's not some sort of point system put in place because if it doesn't look good on TV, you're not going to get them floating fans to come in. No one's going to want to go down now to possibly Drogheda when you can see that it's not being well looked after and the stands haven't been maintained well.
Yeah, and Peter, what was your kind of experience of it from the kind of spectator point of view, kind of going up there? Because I think, was that your first time up at Head in the Game Park?
Yeah, well, I mean, as we mentioned, they had a great support that night because of the initiative with the thanking frontline workers kind of idea and giving out the free tickets. Yeah, like the issue is we got in just as the game was kicking off. The traffic coming up from Dublin had been kind of bad, so we got in at maybe 20 to 8, and we could only get a seat in the back of the away section. And there's like a steel bar that goes across the front of your head, so we couldn't actually see the far side of the pitch. Now, I'm not suggesting that all League of Ireland clubs are going to have like cool little stadiums. I appreciate they're expensive to build, etc. But yeah, I agree with what Karl says. It's just slight improvements. And even Stephen Kenny said this recently, it's going to need more than just the clubs. I think it's going to need the FAI. It's probably going to need state intervention to give clubs the opportunity, because like the hunger is clearly there. There was a great attendance at the game on Friday night. I don't want to harbour too much on the point, but like we've seen great attendances at most of the stadiums throughout the league so far. So facilities are a big thing, and that's something that maybe other sports have in Ireland that the League of Ireland doesn't quite have. But I don't think it's fair like to sort of blame clubs. I think the key is that the FAI / the state needs to get involved and realise there's an asset there, and it's an important thing to have something for younger people maybe to do on a Friday night. So there's value there that I think needs to be used. So yeah, little improvements to grounds here and there would be massive. Yeah,
that would be huge for the future. Now, obviously, Tallaght Stadium is one of the more modern grounds, and they were hosting Shamrock Rovers, of course, 2-2 draw with Sligo Rovers. So Shamrock Rovers went 2-0 down and then fought back in the second half, made a number of changes at the start of the half. So Stephen Bradley, the Shamrock Rovers manager, and Liam Buckley, the Sligo Rovers manager, were speaking to Oisin Langan of LOI TV afterwards. So let's listen to both managers, Stephen Bradley first and then Liam Buckley.
Look, we give away 2 terrible goals, one a really poor goal from our point of view. But I felt on Monday it was a fair result, the draw, but tonight I felt we should have won that game quite comfortably. We had all the game, 27 shots. We just couldn't find that third goal. We knew at half time, we said at half time, even though we were 2 down, we felt we could go and win the game. And the players came out and they were excellent second half, but we just couldn't get that third goal.
You did come back in the second half, you got your 2 goals, you made a couple of switches, Jack came in and Neil came in. What was the thinking behind that? What difference did that make?
Yeah, it was good to get Neil on the left, gave us more balance, left footer on the left, and it was great to get Jack in. I didn't want to involve Jack at all tonight. He's been struggling the last 2 games with a viral infection, and it took a lot out of him. So I didn't want to involve him tonight, but needs must, and we got him on, and I thought he was brilliant for a second half.
Are you not scoring enough goals at the moment, and if so, why?
That'll come. I'm not worried about that. The part of actually our work rate, our energy, our positions, and how threatening we look is very, very good. The goals will come. I'm not concerned about that.
And how would you rate your team's performances so far? I think we're 6-7 games in now at this stage.
Good. Yeah, every game we're getting better. I thought Bowls were good. Dundalk, after 20 minutes, we were very good. And tonight we were the dominant team. I think we completely controlled the game in every aspect. And should win the game. We are very good. Disappointed with the goals we give away, of course, but tonight we were very good, probably the best we've been.
And you know yourself, there's a lot of talk about the quality in your team and you trying to manage that and keep everyone happy. Can you keep them happy, or is it actually okay to leave people, 1 or 2 of them, a bit grumpy if they're not playing, because they're players, they should want to play, they should be grumpy if they're not playing? Is that a good thing to kind of create that atmosphere around the team?
No, the squad is good. The players understand that we've had to work extremely hard to get to this point, and they fully understand that whoever plays on the Friday night or the Monday night, It's about wishing them luck and hoping they can go and do the business. But no, everyone, the squad is together. They've always been that way. That's what we built this on, and that doesn't change because we've had a bit of success. If anything, it brings you more together. So no, we're fine. I think there's a lot of talk from people like yourself on the outside, but inside we're fine.
I'm always spreading rumours, you know me. Did we see it in the second half, the togetherness? Because it would have been easy to wilt when you're 2-0 down against a really good team like Sligo.
I think we've seen it all season, to be honest. I think if you look at Bows, 1 up, second half, you have to dig in. Dundalk up there, we are very good. Pats away, we are very good. And tonight we are very good. No one can ever question the character or the courage of this team and the bravery. And the second half, they showed why they're the champions. They were a tremendous second half.
Liam Buckley, is that a point gained or 2 dropped?
Listen, over to 90 minutes, it's a point gained, I'll be straight. First half, wasn't a lot in it, although I know we were leading 2-0. We've done well to get our goals and took our goals really well. But the second half, we just didn't string any pass together. We just didn't play well enough. And in fairness to Rovers, they had all the ball. Granted, they got a lazy penalty from our point of view. They got them back in the tie, you know, but just unfortunate they got the penalty because that's got them right back in it. But that's it. Look, it's a decent result from where we're at. Bearing in mind, as I said before, if you get ahead of Shamrock Rovers, you're going to win the league this year.
The way it is in Tala, you know when you come here, they're going to have an awful lot of possession, and that was the case in the first half. Yet still, you got 2 goals. That wasn't by accident, though. You pressed up at times, you pressurised them, and created those goals from that pressure.
Yeah, we done reasonably okay. Like really rate him. And they have had quite a bit of the ball for the whole match. But in the first half, they did a little bit less in the first half. And for the few bits and pieces we did do well in the first half, we created a few chances and we've bagged 2 really good goals from where we're at. As I say, just to concede a penalty, the way the game went with half an hour to go, it just brought them right back into it. And we started to defend a bit deeper and couldn't get out of our box. And the rest is history. But look, it's a point gain from where we're at, and as part of our development, we're still moving forward.
So that is Stephen Bradley, Shamrock Rovers manager, and Liam Buckley, his Sligo Rovers counterpart, after that 2-2 draw. So in regards to Shamrock Rovers, Karl, I mean, listening to Stephen Bradley there, he's still quite positive about his team, doesn't seem concerned by their form, but does that tally with what you've seen of them so far?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be... Let's not. Shamrock Rovers won the league by a distance last year, but let's not forget, so many of them games were 1-0 that they, I think, what was it? Was it 4 against Longford were possibly last minute winners. I know that it's like Shamrock Rovers last year, they were just motoring through and ticking games off. They certainly weren't blowing teams out the water, and I think it'll be the same this year. I think there's a lot more strength and depth in the league this year amongst the teams at the top. I think it'll be a slightly closer title race. I think the race for the top 4 will be very strong, but I still see Shamrock Rovers as winning the league. They've such a strong squad, and you look at the players that they bring on and players that they bring off in games. It's frightening to bring Jack Byrne, Farouja on. It just shows how strong their squad is.
Yeah, I suppose Peter on that point has said, Jack Byrne, I think, who was sort of semi-sidelined by illness and then being brought on for the second half. Also the Idemo Amaku coming on at the same time, Aaron Green, and also Neil Farouja. So that as Karl said, that's quite frightening for other teams. Like when I suppose Sligo Rovers go 2-0 up, Aidan Keena with a great goal to add the second, and then suddenly after all that hard work, then players of that quality come on.
Yeah. I mean, Rovers squad is insanely good. The depth there is just massive. Any injury crisis, unless it's exceptional, unless we're getting into like dream team sort of levels of team crisis, I think Rovers are going to be in good nick. I know you've discussed it in the program or in the podcast, I should say, before. You're looking at Europe this season for Rovers. I think they would have looked in at what Bows did last year, and they would have said, like, we want to do something like that. And the squad is there, the depth is there. So it's about now for Stephen Bradley, in my opinion, keeping that squad as happy as he can until the summer. I know you obviously, as a League of Ireland club, you're not building your season just around Europe, but I think that's where, talking to supporters that I would know, that's where the next step is. Like, I mean, he's gone for 3 in a row. They haven't done it in whatever it is, 35 years or whatever. So in that sense, you can't ask too much of him. He's won the cup. The squad depth is there to do it. Obviously, coming back on Friday, it's weird that they fell behind. I saw them the first match of the season, and obviously they were playing UCD, so they were always going to win that, or there was always a good chance they were going to win it, and they looked very comfortable. But Yeah, a few little wobbly bits. It's interesting. Oisín was very diplomatic with him there in the interview. Like, Bradley's always trying. Everyone is against Rovers when it comes to Bradley, I think, to a certain extent. And I thought it was an interesting interview to hear what he had to say. But he's staying positive, and that's all he can do. I think the pressure on him is just normal when you're at a club like Shamrock Rovers. Whether it's fair or not, considering what he's done, I don't know. But I do think Europe's going to be a big thing for this season. For them this season, they'll want to potentially get to a Conference League group stage or whatever it might be, or progress in Champions League. I mean, maybe I'm not being positive enough there, but that's what that depth is, and that's the challenge for Bradley and his management team, keeping those players, nipping at the bud, but also keeping them in a positive frame of mind for that period in the summer.
Yeah, Sligo Rovers, who will also be involved in Europe later on in the year as well, Karl. They remain unbeaten. They've made a great start to the season. As Gary Rogers was saying last week, it kind of bodes well for them the way they've started this campaign. But if we just nail down maybe just on Aidan Keena, because that's coming off the back of a hat-trick against Finn Harps and then scoring against the reigning champions. What is it about him that's really helping Sligo Rovers up front, and like what kind of qualities is he bringing?
Yeah, he's hit the ground running. I think he has 5 goals in 6 games now. He had the hat-trick as well the week before. His finishing has been great, and for me it's how early he's been hitting his strikes. It's just been catching keepers out. His left foot has been fantastic, and for me it's looking to stretch the game in behind. And obviously he's certainly hit the ground running, and it goes back to, I suppose, Liam Buckley, where he pulls these players out from each year on years. Like, you look at Gary Buckley as well under Liam, he's gone from a number 10 attacking midfielder to possibly one of the best centre halves in the league at the moment. And his signing of, as you said, Aidan Keena has been fantastic. For Sligo, they're going to need him to keep scoring. On the weekend, he actually could have had another. I've seen maybe the last 30 minutes of the game, and he had a chance where Sligo were on the counter attack, and look, they could have nicked it. But the last bit that I did see is Stephen Bradley likes to always say Rovers battered teams, but for the last 15 minutes anyway, they were battering. They certainly were battering Sligo. Yeah,
and Peter, you were at UCD versus Bohemians, so that was a 1-1 draw, and it's kind of surprising given Bohemians go 1-0 up through Promise on Machere, and you kind of think they're going to push on, but then UCD managed to get an equaliser. So what was your kind of reading of the game? What happened there?
Yeah, Bows absolutely bursted the blocks. I thought they were going to be 2 or 3 up after 10 minutes. They were really all over UCD, but you kind of think of that Bows team as having a big, massive hole that's over in Australia at the moment in midfield. Without Buckley, UCD were dominant for large periods in that game, which was kind of peculiar because, in fairness, for UCD this season, it's been a lot of sitting back and trying to pick off goals in the break kind of thing. So UCD were on top. UCD possibly could have won it. Like, everyone knows the job that Andy Myler has in his hands to try and keep them in the division this year, but it's just about consistency. They're a young team. I know that's an obvious thing to say with UCD, but a lot of the lads are kind of in that 17 to 20 age bracket. So consistency of performance is massive. They brought in a couple of lads. Eric Yarrow has been, I think, sensational in defence. He's been absolutely class. He's come up through the UCD underage teams. He's only 18 years of age, just turned 18 at the start of last month, and he's been absolutely brilliant considering he hadn't played a Premier Division, even a First Division game. He's been really, really excellent. They also brought in Dylan Duffy from Rovers, and he's been threatening for UCD. But yeah, the game was definitely one that UCD possibly could have won. But then in the last 10 minutes as well, maybe that little bit of fitness that Bows had started to tell, and they did create a couple of chances. But again, a bit like Stephen Bradley, Keith Long is coming under a bit of pressure. I think it's very early in the season, considering all of the things he's achieved. Got the European run last year, the trip to the cup final that they lose on penalties. People need to, he's obviously lost a couple of players, and he's had to bring players in. People need to give the team a bit of a chance. There's a lot of stuff. I know social media is not the best place to look for reaction, but I just had a quick look.
No, never read a Facebook comment section. I think that's rule number 1. Don't go on Twitter, I think is rule number 2.
Insane stuff. I mean, like, people need to be realistic about the budgets and where Bows are. Like, obviously you want your club to be challenging for the league title and all the rest of it, but you also kind of have to be realistic about where they're at. And yeah, himself, Promise Omacheri and Eric Yarrow had a great old battle on Friday night. So yeah, it was an enjoyable enough game. And in fairness, Bows brought a great support. I think the lads were saying something like 1,600 at Belfield. There was even people standing around the side of the pitch, which you'd very rarely see. So yeah, a good atmosphere and a good evening's entertainment.
Yeah, and Karl, what's your reading of Bows' start of the season? Because it's been sort of up and down. I thought the first few games, they seemed to, especially after a winter of upheaval, there was a sense maybe that there was a lot of uncertainty, and they started okay, and then they've sort of dipped a little bit, obviously with the defeat to Shamrock Rovers, which of course it's a derby, but there's no shame in that. And then sort of the 1-1 draw with UCD, where I guess a lot of teams will be looking at UCD as the team they would target to get 3 points.
Yeah, like at the moment, Bows are mid-table, and to be honest, it's where I'd see them finishing this year with the squad that they have. Like, I know, look, they brought back in Chris Twardek, but to lose the players that they've lost in the winter this year, and to expect Keith Long to hit the ground running with the current squad, I think it's just so unrealistic. It's I've certainly had my run-in with Bows in the past, but they'd be lost without Keith Long, if I'm being honest. Like, that man has performed miracles season after season with them, and because it's every year or two they have great players, and next thing it's re-signing another 6 players and putting them into the squad, and it always seems to click after a couple of games that he has them motoring along and then starts to make them hard to beat, and then next thing they start to climb the table. And I'd fully expect that this year. They've got plenty of quality. I know if I was a Bows fan, I certainly wouldn't be putting any pressure on Keith Long. He's a fantastic manager, and he's done great with that Bows squad year after year.
Yeah, and final point on UCD, Peter, any signs of hope for them in terms of the battle to survive? Because they've got 3 good draws so far, one against Finn Harps, and then the one against Bohemians there, and also they held Shelbourne, who we'll talk about very shortly, to a 0-0 draw as well. But the elusive thing so far is a victory. But are there any kind of signs that that might be around the corner?
It's hard to say. Like, you would look at the games against Harps, Shells and Drogheda, and you would think, like, you want to be getting results there. So they went up to Head in the Game Park, I should say, and they were just well beaten. It wasn't a good night for them. The Shells and Harps games at home, not picking up at least one win there would be slightly worrying. So much has been made of Colin Whelan, obviously, before the season and where he might be come June or July or whatever. He's just lacking a bit of confidence. There's probably that little bit of pressure on him, and he just needs one to go in, whether it's sort of, in off his backside from a corner or whatever it might be. And I think he would get a bit of confidence. He had a really good chance. I was at Richmond Park the previous Monday for the game against Pats. He had a great chance just before Pats went ahead, which he missed. And then he had a couple of really good chances against Bows last week as well, and they just won't go in. It's not just up to him, and maybe it's reflective of where the squad is at UCD, that Andy Myler doesn't maybe feel he can take Colin Whelan off. Now, he's an under-21 international. I know you wouldn't maybe want to take him off, but maybe just to put the fire under him, take him off for 10 minutes at the end of a game and maybe give him that bit of motivation. But look, Liam Kerrigan has been absolutely exceptional this year. I don't know where he's going to end up in the summer or at the end of the season, but really, really good, taking teams on. Teams don't really know what to do with him. He's dangerous. He's creative. You'd love a couple of more players around him. But I've sort of gone a long way around answering your question. Do I see results? We've Dundalk and Sligo to come in the next 2 games. That's going to be really difficult. They're both away games as well. Drogheda then come to Belfield. That's a more realistic game to maybe see if you can pick up points. But I think UCD are more hoping that teams stay with them than UCD are going to go up and suddenly shoot up to 6th or 7th. Like 8th would be a dream scenario for UCD, and Andy Myler absolutely would snap anyone's hand off to get that now. I don't know if they're going to manage it. I'll remain hopeful.
Yeah, you mentioned teams staying with them, and the way the results over the weekend played out, it sort of went in that direction, especially in regards to Shelbourne, who had picked up a couple of good points in the Monday turnaround the previous week, and then they get hit 3-0 at home to Finn Harps at Talca Park. So Johnny Ward in his report, which is on RTÉ.ie for anybody who wants to read it, he described them as shockingly out of sorts, and it sort of came out of nowhere a little bit. Karl, I know you were critical of them after the first week because there was a narrative, as you said, where people were saying against Pats that they seemed to play quite well and then just got stung, but you had concerns about them as far back as then, and still, like, they've picked up a few clean sheets since, but they can't seem to score goals with any kind of real reliability or regularity.
No, look, it's a very bad problem to have when you're poor in both boxes. It's ultimately, you can be a team who's great in both boxes and you'll finish mid-table, but if you're poor in both boxes and good in the middle of the pitch, you're really struggling. I watched, it must have been about 45 minutes of the game against Finn Harps, and it would be very, very worrying if you're Damien Duff. If I was an opposition manager, I'd say let them play out from the back. After one pass, go and press them, because Ledwig on the left side of the back three gave it away. It could have been 3-4 times in a row. That all led to huge chances for Finn Harps. They didn't end up in goals, but it just spreads panic amongst the back three. And I'd be very worried for them. At times they look very good. The pitch certainly doesn't help them in Tolka Park at the moment. They do try and play nice football, but they just seem so open at times, especially when they're trying to play out and they lose it. Finn Harps won 3-0 and it could have been more. They also don't look like scoring many this year.
Yeah, but on the flip side for Finn Harps, Peter, we had David Snade on the podcast last week, and he'd written a brilliant piece where he went up with Dave Webster and Bastian Herry on the kind of long road trip from Donegal to Dublin and then all the way back. And, I suppose the inference of all that was Ollie Horgan being able to kind of pull together an eclectic squad and get something out of it. And then I think now this game against Shelbourne is the first time really we've seen the best of them, because they have played reasonably well in other games just without the breaks.
Yeah, certainly against UCD at Belfield, they had their chances and they just didn't take them. I left the bowl at whatever it was, 7:45, 10-7 the other night, thinking, great, UCD aren't going to be bottom of the table, and then Drogheda and Finn Harps went and got those results. But I mean, yeah, Ollie Horgan he's brilliant for the league. We discussed it way back at the start of the season. You do need clubs outside of the Dublin area doing well, and Harps are obviously not going to do anything in terms of a title challenge or anything like that. But a victory like that for them is massive. They just need to keep ticking over. It depends, as we discussed in the last section, it depends how good or bad UCD become, or else Harps might be battling for 8th and above. They don't want to get sucked into a 10th place kind of battle. But yeah, Ollie Horgan he's just consistently getting results. He's a character, and that's the kind of result that's very impressive for them. From a Shelbourne point of view, like, they've obviously had possible good news with Tolka Park off the pitch. So there seems to be a sort of long-term, medium-term goal there. But yeah, it takes a while, I suppose, for a new manager and the few new players that he's got in to settle, and it's his first gig and all the rest of it. So they're just very inconsistent. That'd be the thing I'd be worrying about if I was a Shelbourne supporter. They can be pretty decent one week and then you go out and lose 3-0 at home to Harps. It's hard to get a read on them. But yeah, Finn Harps, yeah, like, that's a fantastic result. I'm annoyed at them for getting it, but yeah, it's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to mention with Shells, of course, which might probably get forgotten because of all the focus on Damien Duff, but they are a newly promoted side, and making that step up is always difficult, especially when they've had to make as many changes as they've had to do to their squad in the off season. But last but not least, but top of the table, Derry City, so a 2-1 win over St. Patrick's Athletic. And as I said earlier when I was reading out the results, it was the game between the two teams that have been tipped to push Shamrock Rovers closest. So it's kind of interesting to see how that played out. So we're going to just listen to St. Pat's manager Tim Clancy and also to Derry City manager Rory Higgins, who were both speaking to Eric White of the BBC.
It's an important result for various reasons, but I just wonder, after the injury to Michael Duffy on Monday night, how important is it that doesn't have a psychological impact on the rest of the squad?
Aye, and Michael, for me, is the most productive player in Ireland. Goals, assists, goal involvements. It's the first time in his career, I think, where he's actually had to deal with a setback with injuries and stuff like that. So, but we have players. We had a good point return in the first 4 games when he wasn't available to us. The players gained confidence from that, and we just hope that we're in a decent position when he returns and we can kick on. But there's no doubt about it, it's a blow. But the players with results like this will grow and we'll keep going. I'm actually a bit disappointed there's a break next week now, and would have liked to have kept the momentum going, but the players deserve a few days off, and we'll come in on Monday and refocus and try and get a good weekend next week.
After 6 games last season, Derry were bottom with just 2 points. You come in after that. 6 games now you've played this season, you're sitting top. What can people read into that?
Not a lot, Eric, to be honest, because loads of teams have had brilliant starts and leagues all over the world, but have faded away. We just need to stay focused and focus on the next game and try and pick up 3 points, and I'm going to keep giving you boring answers, but that is, if you do look too far ahead, then you get done. So we just want to keep a wee bit of momentum going and keep driving on.
Tim, was that hard to take there right at the end?
Listen, when you get to the 93rd minute, whatever it was, where you can see the goal like that, listen, it's disappointing. We win 1-0 down at half time. It's a shot from outside the box, a great finish by Will, in fairness to him. He's cut inside and he's bent into the far corner. And it's identifying players that are capable of doing things like that and knowing that he's right footed and he's on that left side, like just to show him the line onto his weaker foot. But I think we had a few good chances ourselves. Billy's got a shot in the first half, he's a header just over the bar as well. And then we come out and we get a goal, a great finish by Tom. Gets back into the game, I think, for about 15-20 minutes, and I think we're on top. Derry switched to a box midfield, which got them a little bit of emphasis into the game. But again, I think we dealt with most things that they were doing, as balls into the box. We dealt with it well, and then again it comes out in the 92nd or 3rd minute and it's a strike from 25 yards that beats you. And that's probably the difference today, is their shots from the edge of the box were on target and they get 2 goals from them, and the only one we got on target from outside the box, Brian Marr sort of flaps at it and nearly slips into his own goal, so we've got to work the keeper a lot more.
Right, so that was St. Pat's manager Tim Clancy, and before that, Derry City boss Rory Higgins, who at the beginning of that was referencing the injury to Michael Duffy from the previous game, and he's going to be out for a period of time. But then they have Will Patching to score a goal in each half for them against Pats. So Derry ticking along nicely, Karl. I suppose there was a lot of expectation on them this season, not necessarily to go on and win the title or anything like that, but early doors as it may be, like, what's your kind of hope for them now this season, especially with Shamrock Rovers wobbling a little bit, and how far can they push it?
Yeah, look, I think it's, while Shamrock Rovers are wobbling, to just try and be as relentless as they can. It sounds easy, but it's in the games where you're coming up against the teams at the bottom of the table that you need to just make sure that you get them wins. Look, the teams at the top, them games, the motivation take care of itself in them games. For me, it's just, while Shamrock Rovers are slightly not hitting 5th gear yet, I'd be just making sure that, right, we take advantage, pull a gap as big as possible, and then I suppose worry about it from there. Like, it's when you get to summer and get around the European games, especially for Derry, when it comes to that time of year, it's hard to concentrate on the league. So having a gap that big will be, having a big gap at that time, if possible, will be very important, because it's always that time that the teams who are in Europe year on year start to pull away, and then you start to see, I think it was even Sligo and Pats last year, starting to drift away then.
Yeah, and momentum, Jurgen Klopp was referring to it as the kind of fragile flower. It was a direct quote. I'm not sure what poem or whatever he dragged that out of, but anyway, I suppose it was the inference is it's a difficult thing to keep going. And as Rory Higgins said in the clip there, you know, he would have loved maybe just to have more games there rather than going straight into an international break. And momentum has been kind of the theme of what we've been talking about here, even with Ireland, because of the 4-month gap since the Luxembourg game. How difficult is it, like, from your experience, you know, when you're sort of on that run and then suddenly, you know, there's a break of whatever it is, 2 weeks for international games or whatever it is, how difficult is it to sort of recapture what you had before? It's almost just the worry of that just clicking out of routine. So when you're playing and you're ticking off games and you're winning and you're scoring or assisting, it all becomes routine. You start to do the same thing before every single match. You start to train, I suppose, the same way. It's just then the next couple of weeks until the next game, it's okay, it's slightly different. We're going to try and keep the players fresh, but also, I suppose, keep them training intense and try to avoid injuries from training. I suppose it's slightly different, and it's just a different mindset of maybe dropping it down that 0.5%. If you do that, then next thing you find that, oh geez, why am I a bit more tired in this game, or why am I not doing as well? And it's just because that 1 or 2% that you drop down from in training is starting to catch up on you. So it's, I suppose, for Rory Higgins, it'll be massive for him to just, I suppose, drill it into his player for the next week or two that, right, training needs to be as tough as games. That's, I suppose, when we're at Cork with John Caulfield, we say a lot of times that some of his training sessions were a lot tougher than some of the games. Yeah, and Tim Clancy, on the other hand, his point was that for Pats, it's probably a good 2 weeks now for them to kind of, I suppose, settled down. They've had 3 defeats now as well, which is probably a bit of a concern. 3 and 7, although 2 of them were sort of kind of setbacks, which they bounced back from against Shamrock Rovers. Much concern there, or is it just a case of it's still early on in the season and Pats do have quite a good squad there, especially up front, once they get Owen Doyle scoring regularly and Mark Doyle also contributing, that they will gain that momentum that maybe they haven't picked up quite yet.
Yeah, I have no worries about St. Pat's at all. They've a fantastic manager, Jim Clancy, and he's implementing a new style of play. So it's kind of what we've been saying about even Stevie O'Donnell at Dundalk, and even slightly with even with Keith Long at Bows, that when you bring in new players, or you even in this case it's new players and new manager, it's going to take time to settle. For me, St. Pat's have a fantastic squad, and you look at their starting 11, it's a fantastic team. For me, they'll be within the top 3 more than likely come the end of the season.
Yeah, so that is the Premier Division. So the First Division on Friday, it was Wexford who lost 3-0 at home to Longford Town. Athlone lost 2-1 at home to Galway. Cove Ramblers also lost at home to Bray Wanderers 1-0. And then Cork City continued their good start to the season with a 4-0 win at Treaty United. And obviously Waterford not in action because it's their bye week. Anything jumping out to you there, Karl, in terms of, well, I suppose Cork are the obvious one there. And we were talking about them last week, and Neil Horgan was making the point that, you know, on the pitch at least, everything sort of looks positive. Maybe off the pitch with the ownership situation, there's still a little bit of a question mark there long term, but Cork looking good.
Cork are looking fantastic at the moment. At the start of last year, people were slightly questioning Colin Healy, and I couldn't believe it, to be honest, because I know, well, he's going to be a fantastic manager. He's been like that as a player. As a player, he was almost a manager within the dressing room. So he's I know he'll have them players not getting ahead of themselves at all and training very tough every day. And it's not only on the pitch that things are going well. You look at the stands, the crowds that they're pulling in at the moment, Cork City, it's frightening for a First Division team. I know them and Galway are doing great this year for attendances, so long may it continue.
Yeah, so attendance is great, but also the way the table, Peter, has been kind of already, we're kind of seeing a sort of divide between the 3 full-time teams. Obviously Waterford, as I said, not in action this weekend, but they had made a good start to the season until they lost to Cork City. But it looks like Cork, Galway, Waterford are going to sort of run away with it, and maybe outside of that, maybe Longford potentially might be the only ones to kind of hang on to the coattails.
Yeah, the thing about the First Division, obviously, is, as you've mentioned, is the fact that the top 5 of the 9 clubs have something to play for right up until the last day, in theory, anyway. So, you know, I like the look of Wexford. Obviously, we had Ian Ryan as an assistant manager at UCD for a while, and he has Dinny Corcoran in there up front. Obviously, a guy who can score goals in the Premier Division, so he's definitely capable of scoring goals in this division. So yeah, I would fancy possibly Wexford to maybe get in the top 5 as well. But yeah, like you've seen with the last couple of seasons, 2 years ago, Longford finished and went through the promotion playoff and managed to get into the Premier Division. And then last year with UCD, now Longford went down and potentially UCD are going to go back down as well. But the point about it is, with that momentum that you get from playing in the First Division and potentially winning games regularly, you can take on a Premier Division team that finishes 9th and beat them. So I think there's that massive amount of motivation. But at the same time, the other side of it with the First Division is the fact that you can finish in the top 5 and still have something to play for. You can afford, like Wexford last week, to lose 3-0, and you don't want to do it every week or anything, but you just kind of put it behind you and next week keep going, you know. So it's a sort of a peculiar one with just 9 teams in it. But yeah, my tip at this remove would be for Wexford maybe to get in that top 5 as well.
Okay, we'll see how that pans out anyway, because there is an international break for the Premier Division, there isn't one for the First Division. We'll bring the fixtures very shortly. But in the Women's National League on Friday, again, the top 3 in, like the men's First Division, the top 3 in the Women's National League are kind of building momentum. And I think Lisa Fallon had sort of set it out that was going to be likely to be between Wexford, Peamount and Shelbourne. And that's the results that panned out. So Athlone Town were beaten 2-0 by Shelbourne. Peamount United, 15 goals now in 3 games, 5-1 win over Treaty United. Galway drew 1-1 with DLR Waves. Bohemians lost 3-0 at home to Wexford Youths. Cork lost 2-1 to Sligo Rovers, which is a historic win for Sligo. This at the third attempt in their first season in the top or in the WNL getting a victory. So that's a great boost for them after a couple of difficult games early on, but they'll have built a little bit of momentum. But anyway, first off, in terms of the first division, as I said, there are fixtures on the 25th of March, so all 7:45 kickoffs as well. Cork City against Athlone Town, Treaty United against Waterford, Longford Town against Galway United, and Bray Wanderers against Wexford FC. And in the Women's National League on the Saturday, the 2 p.m. games, Wexford versus Treaty United, Athlone versus Galway, Shelbourne versus Cork City, and then Sligo versus Bohemians, and also DLR Waves versus Peamount is the 4 p.m. game, which I think brings us to an end there, lads. So obviously thanks, Peter, for going and checking out all the UCD games for us and bringing us as much detail about them as possible for this week. And Karl, also thanks a mil for taking the time. I presume we're all going to be watching these Ireland friendlies very closely anyway.
Yeah, fingers crossed Stephen Kenny can keep the momentum, and I suppose if you can get a win and a draw out of it, it'd be a fantastic 2 games.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, I suppose, with Belgium not having their any player with 50 caps or more, there's a little bit of an opportunity there, especially with a buoyant home crowd as well. And Peter, I know I heard your voice piping in there. So
no, I was just going to say it's interesting that Stephen Kenny is no longer talking about building his squad or looking at players. Like he said at the press conference very clearly, he has targets this year. So I suppose it'll be interesting. Obviously, these two being friendlies, it'll be interesting to see, is that this is kind of a last chance saloon for a couple of players to try and impress them before the Nations League and then heading into the Euro qualifiers eventually. So it's it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see that they got good attendances obviously before Christmas. It'll be interesting to see what they get in that regard as well. Yeah,
certainly. I think in the Belgium game anyway, there's I think that looks like it's probably going to be a sellout or close to it, even without the likes of Lukaku and De Bruyne and all the kind of experienced names. But I think that also points to the sort of momentum and excitement when it comes to what this new look Ireland looks like. But we'll be keeping an eye on that. So Belgium on Saturday and then Lithuania on Tuesday, and we'll be back with the podcast next week to reflect on both of those. So Peter and Karl, thanks a million for taking the time.
Cheers, Ralph.
Thanks.